Betrayal Hub. Subscribe. Subscribe for realistic relationship stories that don't try to sell you a lesson. She leaned in close while the bass rolled through the room and the lights swept across the crowd. Her hand brushed mine for a second, not affectionate, not absent-minded, calculated. Then she turned her head just enough so only I could hear her. She didn't smile. She didn't look embarrassed. She said it the way someone sets a boundary they've already crossed. She told me not to touch her at the party. I let my hand fall back to my side. I didn't ask why. I didn't look around to see who was watching. I just nodded once and took a half step back, like I'd been dismissed from a meeting that ran over schedule. The venue was loud and polished, one of those downtown spaces that looked unfinished on purpose. Claire loved places like this. She said they felt alive. She worked the room the way some people work a phone, always scanning, always calibrating. Tonight was supposed to be an easy appearance. One drink, some small talk, faces remembered. That's what she told me on the drive over, adjusting her lipstick in the mirror while I watched traffic. I was there as background. I always was. The engineer husband. The steady one. The guy who built things that stayed upright and never asked for credit. After she stepped away from me, she didn't come back. Not immediately. Not even with a glance. She slid into a circle of people near the bar, her laugh lifting just enough to cut through the music. I recognized most of them from other nights like this. Marketing directors, brand reps, a few men who introduced themselves too loudly. Then I saw him. Ryan stood out the way a flare does. Jacket open, shirt too clean for the crowd, voice pitched to be heard across conversations that weren't his. He'd known Claire before me. Not closely, not meaningfully. He was the kind of man I avoided by instinct. All motion, no depth. The kind who mistook attention for substance. She noticed him noticing her. I stayed where I was, near the edge of the room, my drink untouched. When someone asked who I was with, I didn't step in. I didn't correct them. I didn't place a hand on her back or offer a confirming smile. I just let the question pass unanswered, like background noise. From across the room, Claire finally looked for me. Not to reconnect. To check. I wasn't gone. I was exactly where I'd been all night. But for the first time, she couldn't tell what I was to her anymore. I stayed long enough to see the shift. It didn't announce itself. It never does. It moved quietly through the room, carried by glances that lasted a second too long and laughter that arrived too fast. Claire's body angle changed. Her shoulders stopped facing the circle and started opening toward Ryan. He didn't touch her at first. He didn't need to. He leaned in like he belonged there, like the space had been waiting for him. Someone from her team recognized me near the high table and gave a polite nod. He asked if I was enjoying the night. He asked if Claire was around. I told him she was busy. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't complete. The music dipped and rose again. Drinks were refreshed. Phones came out. I watched Ryan gesture toward the balcony doors, casual, confident. Claire hesitated for half a beat. Then she followed him. That was the moment I felt it settle. Not shock. Not anger. A confirmation that didn't need words. A woman I barely knew, one of Claire's clients, came up beside me. She glanced toward the balcony and then back at me, her expression careful. She said she thought I'd left earlier. She said she didn't realize Claire came alone tonight. She didn't wait for an answer. She smiled and moved on. I didn't chase the misunderstanding. I didn't correct it. I let it stand where it landed. From the corner of the room, I could see the balcony through the glass. Ryan was animated, playing to the night air like it was an audience. Claire stood close enough that her arm brushed his. When she laughed, she tilted her head the way she used to when she wanted someone to feel chosen. Another man drifted toward me, someone I'd met once before. He worked with Ryan. He mentioned an upcoming event, said Ryan was everywhere lately, said he always knew how to make himself visible. He glanced toward the balcony and smiled like he was in on something. I nodded. I took a slow sip of my drink. I said nothing. Claire finally came back inside alone. Her eyes scanned the room, searching with more urgency now. When she saw me, she paused. There was a flicker of relief that didn't quite land. She started toward me, then stopped when Ryan appeared behind her again, his hand landing lightly at the small of her back like it belonged there. She didn't remove it. I didn't move. For the first time that night, she wasn't managing the room. The room was watching her. And I was standing still enough for all of them to notice who wasn't standing with her anymore. I didn't leave when the party thinned out. I stayed long enough to watch patterns repeat. Ryan circled. Claire followed. Not tightly. Not openly. Close enough that anyone paying attention would connect the dots without needing proof. Phones came out more often now. Not for messages. For angles. For stories that would vanish by morning, but leave impressions behind. At some point, Ryan disappeared into the hallway that led toward the private rooms. Claire hesitated again. This time the hesitation lasted longer. She glanced in my direction once more, sharper now, like she expected me to react. I didn't. I was already halfway out of the picture. When she followed him, I turned away and walked toward the bar. The bartender asked if I wanted another drink. I shook my head and asked for water. He gave me a look like he'd already figured something out. He didn't ask anything else. I stepped outside into the quieter air near the entrance, where people lingered between rides and conversations lost momentum. From there, I could see reflections in the glass behind me. Claire's phone lit up more than once. Her posture changed when she read something. Less confident, more alert. Later, when she passed by me without stopping, I caught the screen of her phone in the reflection. Ryan's name sat at the top. Messages stacked close together. Too fast. Too eager. Not the rhythm of two people just talking business. She didn't notice that I noticed. A mutual acquaintance approached me, someone who'd known us since before the marriage. He said it was good to see me. He asked if Claire was overwhelmed tonight. He said she seemed distracted. He said Ryan had a way of pulling focus. He said it with a half smile, like it was a harmless observation. I didn't agree. I didn't disagree. I let the silence answer for me. When Claire finally came back into the open area, her jacket was gone. Her hair wasn't. She looked around again, faster now, less composed. When she found me near the exit, she started toward me with intention. Then her phone buzzed again. She stopped mid-step. She typed. She smiled at the screen. Then she slipped the phone into her bag and lifted her head like she'd made a decision she didn't plan to explain. That was enough. I left without saying goodbye. I didn't announce it. I didn't wait for her to notice. Outside, I paused just long enough to turn off location sharing on my phone. One tap. Clean. Quiet. Inside, the party continued. By the time Claire realized I was gone, the story had already written itself without me in it. I didn't go home that night. Not because I was avoiding something, but because I didn't want to return to a place that would immediately ask questions without words. I drove until the city thinned out, then checked into a small hotel I'd used before on work trips. The clerk didn't recognize me. That mattered more than I expected. In the room, I put my phone face down on the desk and left it there. I showered, changed, and sat on the edge of the bed while the noise of the city settled into something distant. When I finally looked at the screen, there were missed calls. Then more. Messages stacked the same way I'd seen Ryan's earlier. The difference was the timing. These came in waves, not confidence. Short gaps, then longer ones. I didn't open them. By morning, the tone shifted. Fewer calls, longer pauses. The last message came through while I was finishing coffee in the lobby. I didn't read it, but I saw the preview. She asked where I was. Not if I was okay. Not what happened. Just where. I checked out and drove to my office instead of home. The building was quiet, the way I liked it. I went through the motions I knew by heart. Emails answered. Drawings reviewed. A meeting taken without comment. No one there knew anything had changed. That was the point. Around midday, I turned off my phone completely. Claire filled the silence herself. I know because later, people told me. She called mutual friends, asking if they'd seen me leave. She framed it as concern at first, then irritation. Someone said she laughed it off, said I probably just needed space. Someone else said her voice didn't match the words. Ryan made an appearance online that afternoon. A photo from the night before surfaced, cropped just enough to make it ambiguous. Claire was visible in the background, mid-laugh, mid-motion. Not guilty, not innocent, just there. I didn't react. That evening, I packed a bag from the office and drove out of town. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I wouldn't be accidentally found. I canceled a joint credit card on the way, not dramatically, just enough to create friction. I rerouted notifications. I made myself unreachable without announcing it. By the second day, the calls stopped. By the third, the messages changed again. Fewer questions. More statements. She said we needed to talk. She said this wasn't fair. She said she didn't understand what I was doing. I understood it perfectly. I wasn't disappearing from her life. I was removing myself from the version of it where my presence was optional. I didn't plan to involve Ryan. I didn't need to. Men like him leave traces without being followed. Visibility is their weakness. While Claire was busy trying to pull me back into range, his name started surfacing in places I hadn't looked for it. A colleague from a past project called me under the pretense of checking in. Halfway through the conversation, he mentioned an upcoming corporate event that had quietly changed promoters. He said Ryan's company had been dropped. No drama, just a line item removed. He said it was strange because Ryan had been bragging about that contract for weeks. I said nothing. I listened. Later that day, another message came in through an old professional channel I rarely used. Someone forwarded a public complaint from a venue manager. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't meant for my eyes. Ryan's name was there again, tied to delays, missing permits, and a reputation for promising more than he delivered. Nothing explosive, just enough erosion to be noticeable. Claire tried to reach me again that evening, this time through work. She sent a neutral message, like she was pitching a client. Polite, controlled. She said she didn't know what story people were starting to tell and wanted to get ahead of it. She said my silence was creating the wrong impression. I didn't respond. Ryan, meanwhile, leaned harder into being seen. New posts, new angles, captions that tried too hard to sound relaxed. He tagged people who didn't repost him. He showed up at events where his presence felt forced. The room adjusted around him instead of opening. By the end of the week, his momentum stalled. Not because anyone attacked him, because no one caught him when he overreached. Claire noticed before I did. She always had a sense for social temperature. She stopped mentioning his name. She stopped appearing in the same frames. When someone brought him up around her, she redirected, smiled, changed subject. She still couldn't find me. Friends started asking questions differently now. Not where I was, but what was going on. Not with concern, but curiosity. They'd seen the party photos. They'd seen Ryan fade. They'd seen Claire alone in rooms where she used to anchor herself. I remained exactly where I intended to be. Present enough to be undeniable. Absent enough to be unreachable. The story wasn't about confrontation anymore. It was about who could stand alone when the noise stopped working. By the weekend, the silence had spread past me and started pressing in on her from other sides. It showed up at a small dinner she hosted for people she usually relied on. The kind of night where she controlled the seating, the lighting, the flow of conversation. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. The absence did the work. One of her friends arrived late and scanned the room the way people do when they expect a familiar shape to steady things. Someone asked where I was, casually, like it didn't matter. Claire answered with a light shrug and said I had work. No one followed up. The topic changed too quickly. Another guest mentioned the party from the week before. Someone said it looked fun. Someone else said it looked crowded. Then a pause opened, thin but noticeable. A woman across the table said she thought I'd stepped out early that night. She said she didn't even realize Claire was married until someone mentioned it later. Claire laughed. It sounded practiced. Too even. Later, a colleague of hers stopped by unannounced. He stayed near the door. He asked if everything was okay. He said a client had asked whether Claire was still anchored, his word, not hers. He said people liked knowing who was steady behind the scenes. She told him not to worry. She said I was around. She said things were fine. The words landed wrong. The next day, she attended a daytime event alone. Ryan was there too, though not as close as before. He hovered, uncertain now, like he was waiting for her to reattach herself publicly. She didn't. She kept space. Too much space. When someone asked if they were working together, she smiled and said it was complicated. No one pushed. I heard about it afterward through someone who didn't know I was supposed to be unreachable. They said Claire seemed off. Not upset, just unmoored. They said she kept checking her phone between conversations, then putting it away untouched. That evening, she posted a photo. Just her. No context. No tag. The caption was vague enough to invite speculation. It didn't work. The comments stayed light. Surface level. Nothing to hold on to. I didn't respond. I didn't correct any assumptions. I didn't reclaim my place. By the end of the week, the question wasn't where I'd gone. It was why she looked like someone who'd lost something she couldn't name, in rooms full of people who used to confirm it for her. She found me by accident. Not through tracking or asking the right person, but through routine. I was back in the city for a meeting I couldn't move. Same building, same entrance, different posture. I kept my schedule tight and my head down. It still didn't matter. She was waiting across the street when I came out. Not pacing. Not dramatic. just standing there like she'd been there longer than she wanted to admit. When she saw me, she didn't wave. She didn't rush. She watched first, like she needed to confirm I was real. I stopped a few steps short of her. I didn't close the distance. I didn't open my arms. I didn't ask how she'd been holding up. The city noise filled the space between us and did the talking for me. She said my name once. Quiet. Careful. She said she'd been worried. She said this wasn't how adults handled things. She said people were starting to ask questions she didn't know how to answer. I listened without reacting. My face stayed neutral. Not cold. Not kind. Just unavailable. She stepped closer, then stopped herself. She looked around, aware of the glass windows, the reflections, the strangers passing by. She lowered her voice. She said she didn't understand why I was doing this to her. She said whatever happened at the party didn't mean anything. She said Ryan was a mistake, framed like a footnote, not a choice. I didn't correct her timeline. I didn't bring up what I'd seen or what others had noticed. I didn't say his name. She reached for my hand and caught herself halfway. The gesture collapsed in on itself. Her shoulders tightened. Her eyes searched my face for a reaction she could use. There wasn't one. That was when her control slipped. Not outwardly. Internally. She started explaining instead of asserting. Filling space instead of directing it. She talked about stress. About pressure. About how everything felt louder lately. How she felt like she was losing her footing. I didn't step in to steady her. People walked past us. Some glanced. Some recognized us. No one stopped. From the outside, it looked like two people standing near each other with nothing urgent to say. That was the part she couldn't handle. She asked if I was coming home. I told her I wasn't sure. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a promise. It was the truth, and it landed harder than anything I could have raised my voice to say. After that meeting, she didn't chase me the way she would have before. She adjusted. That was her skill. When direct access failed, she tried proximity. When proximity failed, she tried narrative. She told people we were taking space. She framed it as mutual. She said it with confidence, like confidence could make it true. At first, it worked. A few nodded. A few accepted it without thinking. But the story had gaps, and gaps attract attention. We crossed paths again at a professional mixer neither of us could avoid. Smaller than the party. Quieter. The kind of room where absence is louder because there's nowhere to hide it. I arrived alone and stayed near the perimeter, speaking only when spoken to. I didn't scan for her. She found me anyway. This time she didn't approach immediately. She watched first, measuring. She waited until I was mid-conversation with someone she respected. When there was a natural break, she stepped in like she belonged there. Like nothing between us had changed. She addressed the group, not me. She laughed at the right moments. She referenced shared history without naming it. Then she turned to me and asked if we could talk for a minute. Her tone light enough that refusing would look unreasonable. I didn't refuse. I stepped aside with her, just far enough that the room could still see us. She spoke quickly now, quietly. She said she needed clarity. She said this limbo was damaging. She said people were starting to assume things that weren't fair to her. She said whatever point I was making had landed. I let her finish. When I spoke, it was calm and brief. I told her I wasn't making a point. I told her I wasn't trying to teach anyone a lesson. I told her I'd simply stop participating in something that no longer included me. She stared at me like I'd changed languages. She said that wasn't how relationships worked. She said silence was manipulation. She said walking away without a fight was cruel. I didn't argue with her definitions. I looked past her, not dismissively, just neutrally, at the room behind her. At the people pretending not to listen while absorbing everything. Then I looked back at her and said I didn't know an explanation for choosing distance. That was the moment her composure cracked. Not visibly. Strategically. She realized there was nothing to push against. No anger to provoke. No defense to dismantle. She asked me what I wanted. I told her I already had it. I stepped away before she could ask what that meant. I rejoined the room alone, leaving her standing where she couldn't follow without exposing how much she needed to. For the first time since the party, she wasn't losing me. She'd already lost control of the story. Her fall wasn't loud. There was no single moment people could point to later and say that's when it happened. It came in pieces, spaced just far enough apart that no one rushed to catch her. Ryan disappeared first. Not dramatically. He stopped showing up where he used to be unavoidable. His post slowed, then stalled. When his name came up, it was followed by a pause. then a subject change. Claire didn't ask about him anymore. She didn't have to. His usefulness had expired, and without momentum, he had nothing to offer her. What replaced him wasn't relief. It was emptiness. Work began to slip, not in output, but in perception. She was still competent, still polished, but something essential was missing. The sense that she had backup. The quiet assurance that someone solid existed just outside the frame. Clients noticed. They didn't complain. They hesitated. Meetings ended earlier than expected. Follow-ups came slower. At a small gathering hosted by one of her longtime allies, she arrived alone again. She stayed near the center at first, then gradually drifted outward as conversations formed without her. She laughed at the right times, but her eyes kept scanning, searching for something that wasn't there anymore. Someone asked how I was. Not casually, carefully. She answered with practiced neutrality. She said I was busy. She said I needed space. The words sounded thin in the air, like they'd been reused too many times. Later that night, she sat alone longer than she meant to. The room emptied around her while she stared at her phone without touching it. Every memory that surfaced did so without warning. A hand on her back in crowded rooms. A calm voice in moments when things could have gone wrong and didn't. My presence in the background, steady and unremarkable, until it was gone. Those memories didn't soften her. They cornered her. She went home to a quiet apartment that no longer felt neutral. It felt unfinished. She moved through it restlessly, opening drawers, touching objects that had lost their context. Everything reminded her of how little noise stability makes until it's removed. She reached out one last time. Not with anger, not with strategy, with honesty stripped of performance. The message came through late, simple, unguarded. She said she finally understood what she'd broken. I read it. I didn't reply. By the time she realized that silence wasn't a tactic anymore, but a boundary, there was nothing left for her to negotiate except the truth she'd avoided when it still could have mattered. I saw her one last time without planning to. It was early evening, the city settling into that brief quiet before the next rush. I was leaving a building I no longer associated with her when I noticed her across the street, standing still like she'd been placed there rather than arriving on her own. She didn't look prepared. No rehearsed expression. No controlled posture. Just tired in a way that couldn't be styled away. She crossed when the light changed. She stopped a few steps from me, careful not to crowd the space. She didn't reach out. She didn't accuse. She didn't perform. She said my name once, the way she had the first time she found me. Then she stopped herself, like she understood something had changed about how much access that name still gave her. She told me she wasn't there to argue. She said she wasn't there to justify anything. She said she knew apologies arrived late and didn't undo damage. She said she just needed me to know she finally saw it clearly. Not the party. Not Ryan. The pattern. The way she'd treated my presence like something permanent enough to neglect. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't soften. She said she missed the way things felt solid when I was around. She said she hadn't understood the cost of making me invisible until I stopped making myself available. She said losing me had been quieter than she expected and worse because of it. When she finished, the silence stayed between us. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't awkward. It was complete. She asked if there was any chance of starting over. I didn't answer right away. Not to create drama. Because the answer deserved accuracy. I told her I hadn't disappeared. I told her I'd just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. I told her whatever came next would only exist if it was built differently. Slowly. Without assumptions. Without me being background to someone else's life. She nodded. Not in relief. In understanding. She didn't reach for me. She didn't try to close the distance. She accepted the space the way someone accepts a condition they can't negotiate. I turned to leave. Not abruptly. Not ceremoniously. Just finished. As I walked away, I didn't look back. Not because I was angry. Because I wasn't wondering anymore. Behind me, the city moved on. So did I? And for the first time, the silence followed her instead of me. Drop it in the comments. Hit subscribe. This is where we talk about what doesn't get forgiven.